So I'm Kohei Sanno. I'm a student from SES. I'm a senior, and I'm a member of the Executive Service Council. And I'm joined by Cal.
Hi guys, I'm Cal. I'm also a senior, and I'm also on the ESC, as Kohei just mentioned.
All right. And so for today, I'd like to just sort of talk about tech integration into service learning, especially as pertains to fundraising and raising awareness. And so really the goal of this workshop is to sort of illustrate why there is a need to integrate technology into service now more than ever. And to sort of talk about the what and the how, right? How can we do this, right? What exactly can we do in order to integrate technology into service? So Dr. Bagan, if you don't mind launching the poll that we have prepared. So Dr. Bagan is just going to launch a poll right now. So if you can quickly just sort of answer it, it's a yes/no question. Just sort of get a feel, and I just sort of want this to be a little thing that we can talk about in the beginning to just sort of get this workshop started. Yeah, so if you can just quickly answer the poll. And let me just wait a second. I'm wondering how I can see that.
I think so. Just to see the results, you have to close the poll, then you can display results.
Okay.
Dr. Bagan, is that an option?
I'll run it for just a few more seconds.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not sure if you guys can see the polls, but the results I'm seeing is that an overwhelming majority of you answered no to this question, right? No to the question, did you regularly hold virtual meetings before COVID-19? Okay. 6 out of 35 of you said yes, 29 of you said no. To me, I'm going to be frank, this is exactly what I expected, because I can talk from my experience that I never really considered holding virtual meetings before COVID-19, right? And COVID-19 has sort of forced us into a position where we have to hold these virtual meetings exactly as we're doing it right now, right? And so, yeah, as I said, I just want to talk about the why, the what, and the how. And I think the first question that we're all wondering is why we want to integrate tech into service, right? And to refer back to the poll, right now we're in a position where we have been forced to some extent to integrate technology into service, right? Because this is the only way in which we can communicate, right? And with COVID-19, I think we can all admit that we've all become, in one way or another, a little more technologically literate, right? Some of us have become more comfortable with handling virtual meetings. Some of us didn't even know how to handle video calls, but now we do, right? Some of us have given more thought to how we can engage our audience a little better through virtual means, right? In that type of sense, I think more than ever, we're thinking, right, about how can we improve the work that we do, the service that we do through technological means. Right? And even outside of the context of COVID-19, I think, if you look down the list of the service clubs that are involved in any of our schools, there are these service clubs that are involved with local communities, but there are also these service clubs that are involved with, schools from the US, schools in Cambodia, NGOs from the Philippines, things like that, right? And in order to sort of, we talked about bridges in the previous workshop, right? In order to sort of build those bridges, we really believe that technology is really the key factor in that recipe. Right. And I'd like to sort of just draw on this little quote from Christopher Launch, who was sort of a political scientist back in the 1900s that I think is really pertinent. So this was a quote from the 1900s, early 1900s, but I still think it holds true today, right? And it basically says that technology is a useful servant, but a dangerous master. So I want us to sort of think about that for a second and what that means, and as it pertains to our world today, right? And I want you to think about whether we're servants to that technology that we're using, or whether we're masters of it. Right? Are we harnessing it, or are we being harnessed by it? And I think, in the times of COVID-19, it's really important to acknowledge the fact that technology, when we take advantage of it, when we use it in the proper ways, which we're going to talk about today, it can really be a useful, a game-changing factor in the service that we do, right? And so the bottom line that I sort of want to get at is that technology should really be there to facilitate, right? Technology should be there to facilitate, to really be there as an auxiliary support system for you to accomplish your service. Right? And this is the point that I really want to get at. Okay? Technology should serve as a lubricator to facilitate transmission of information across different communities. And the way I'm just going to sort of illustrate that before we begin is by sort of approaching service from a diagrammatical point of view, right? So say we tried to illustrate service from a top-down diagram flowchart point of view. For example, this is what a typical fundraiser would look like, right? Say you have a typical fundraiser like a bake sale where you're also handing out pamphlets or something, right? You can sort of approach it from a money point of view and also from an information point of view, right? And in a typical fundraiser, money would generally be flowing from the student body to you, the service club, right? And information, whether it be information about the club, information about the people you're serving, things like that should be flowing from the you to your audience, right? And this is obviously a very simple example, right? It gets a little more complicated when you have a little, large scale events. For example, in a gala dinner, right? Money would still be flowing from the guests to the service club. But for example, first you'd have to invite people, right? That's one flow of information. Then from the students and parents, they'd have to get back, right? They'd have to RSVP, right? And they may have to give out information about what their meal preferences are, things like that. Then the information goes back to the service club, where then they would, on the night of the event, talk about their club, talk about their mission, things like that, right? And even this is sort of a simplified representation of what a gala dinner would look like, right? And basically what I'm trying to get at is that in service, there are a lot of different stakeholders, a lot of different communities involved, right? Whether it be your guests, whether it be your organizers, whether it be, the original NGO, right? There are lots of different parties that are involved in this, right? And at each point, there is a little junction. There's a little point of communication. There's a point of transmission of information or funds or whatever in between those two parties, right? And what I mean by technology should serve as the lubricator, what I mean is that technology should really serve an auxiliary role to facilitate the transmission of information, of funds, or of anything between those different parties. Right? And the way I think we can really do that is by considering what I call the 3 A's. Right? So you can sort of quickly read through them. The 3 A's, they are automating manual processes, increasing accessibility, and augmenting your content. And so I'm just going to sort of go through each of these 3 A's and sort of talk about an example of each of these 3 A's. And so the first one, automating manual processes, right? The general point that I've noticed whenever I try to sort of, automate things that we've been doing manually is that the less time we're doing busy work, right? The less time we're doing monotonous work that, a robot could be doing, the less time we're doing that, the more time we're actually doing service, right? And, in an ideal world, we'd be spending, 0 time at all, right? Sorting through spreadsheets or clicking our 2 buttons just to sort of sort through what form responses, checking attendance, things like that, right? And the less time we're actually doing that, the more time we're spending ideating for your next fundraiser, right? Or executing on your plans that you've made already. And an example that I'd like to raise of this that we have at our SAS community is the SAS service portal. So the SAS service portal, we actually had before the service portal. So just to quickly talk about what the service portal is, the service portal is basically a one-stop shop for all of your logistical service needs. Right? And so the SAS service portal is a platform where every student has an account and they can essentially join clubs. They can log in to meetings, record their attendance, and check whatever their service hours. And this is a platform that we made because we noticed that a lot of officers were actually just spending a lot of time sorting through spreadsheets for attendance. Right. Before this, we actually used to have each service club used to have a designated officer for spreadsheets, for taking care of attendance and taking care of the spreadsheets, right? And through the SAS service portal, we actually sort of automated most of these processes, so that we're actually spending less time taking care of those logistical aspects of service, right? And so here you can sort of like see what previous events you've had, and here this is a join club screen where you can take a look at all the clubs that are available, and you can sort of click on join to join the club. And this is really just a nifty tool that we have, right? And notice how this isn't entirely controlling our service anymore, but this is just rather an auxiliary tool that we're using to lubricate that process of joining clubs, of checking attendance, of logging service hours, right? And the second point that I'd want to discuss is increasing accessibility, right? I talked about how service is becoming increasingly global, right? And how we're forced to socially distance ourselves, right? And in order to make sure that your message, your content is getting to the people that you want it to get to, it's really important to harness whatever technological resources you have available, right? And I'd like to quickly talk through an example as well. And and an example that really comes to mind for me is TASL. So TASL stands for Teaching and Sharing Skills to Enrich Lives. And this is a service club at SAS that serves the poor in rural Cambodia through education, right? And one thing that we do at TASL is that we actually teach Cambodian children through software really similar to Zoom, right? And that's one way in which we're actually making ourselves available. A second example is the TASL 2019 Gala. So this was a gala dinner that we had last year. And, I won't go through it. I won't play the video, but you guys, I can send a link to the video later on if you guys are interested. But this was essentially just an opportunity for us to basically have our donors gather, and for us to really talk about TASL and our needs, and for them to donate essentially. Right. And it was really successful because we had over 200 people who came, and we raised a lot of money, and we really reached our goal. Yeah, so and I think the reason why we were actually really successful was because we believe we were able to provide the guests with as much information as they wanted about the club. And the way we did that, we actually did that through a couple of ways. So, yeah. So these are just a few photos from the gala. And this is an example of a table, and you'd notice that there is an iPad in the middle, right? And so we actually had around 10 to 20 tables, and we actually had an iPad on each table, right? And this sort of served as the centerpiece, where they basically saw all the information they needed for the night on that one iPad, right? And this was actually really convenient because we actually didn't have to print out pamphlets, right? And this was just a really convenient way for people to access that information without needing to print out a bunch of things, right? Another way in which we did this was, this is actually an example of a slide from that iPad centerpiece. We actually linked our website onto the slideshow, so that if people were interested, they can actually sort of click on or go on that link through their smartphones and check out more information. And notice how if we were going analog, we would have had to print everything out, or have laminated posters or something, right? Instead of doing that, we actually made everything available online, right? And because people have smartphones, this is actually a really easy way for people to access that type of information. And even donation as well. We did it through a QR code so that people could really easily donate online, right? And we actually went cashless during that event. So we actually didn't accept cash. We actually did it all through online donations and a few checks. And I think it was really, an example of how we can actually use technology, how we can use iPads and websites and that type of thing to actually make content available for people, right? And also, obviously, to reduce waste, and for us to really be flexible with how we're providing that type of information.
So Nick, so Kohei has been talking a lot about kind of technology aiding your service, right? It's making it more accessible to people, and it's automating it, so you have to spend less time on manual work. But another thing you have to consider is, what if technology kind of is the content? It's augmenting the content you already have. And so I've put here, better content equals more demand, and I'll get into that. So next slide, Kohei. So I wasn't able to include the video. For some reason, YouTube is glitching on me. But essentially, every year, SEASC hosts a service assembly. And what that is, it's introducing all our clubs, kind of giving a layout for how the year will go in terms of service, that kind of thing. And so last school year, we were able to get a 1-hour slot in one of the school days to give a service assembly. But obviously this year, we weren't able to do so because of COVID. And obviously, sorry, I keep saying obviously a lot, but the first thing that came to our mind was that we have to do a film, right? We have to film a service assembly. But then the second thought that came into our mind is that we can't make a 1-hour film. No one, logically, no one wants to watch a 1-hour service assembly, no matter how much you love service. Like, just watching that for that long, it's tiring. So we realized that we had to cut back down to 30 minutes, which was our previous length before the 1-hour slot we were given last year. And it was because of COVID. It was this exigence, this need that COVID created that gave us the opportunity and the need to create a 30-minute virtual service assembly. And what we realized, and the feedback we got, was that a lot of people actually like this option more than the in-person 1-hour assembly. And that was because this year we condensed everything. We took out all the unnecessary things that we had. We cut down to the bare essentials, and we were able to make a really good 30-minute service assembly film, right? So that was an augmentation of the service that we already had, right? And it also relates to this college metaphor that I've been hearing, that a lot of students appreciate recorded lectures because they can be revisited later. So if you want to look it up later, the service assembly is still on our Executive Service Council YouTube page. That's not something that happens once, like an in-person assembly, and then people have to rely on their memory to revisit what was said. No, this is something that's staying on the internet so they can come back to it. If there's something they missed during watching it for the first time, they can come back and watch it. And it was the same thing with our club fair. So our club fair is that we have booths set up around the school, and students can approach clubs and ask them, hey, when do you meet? What kind of service do you do? That kind of thing, right? But obviously this year we had to do virtual. So we set up also on our YouTube page an interview with every club by an Executive Service Council officer. And that was kind of simulating what a club fair would be, but online. And that was kind of an augmentation, because that was really the only or the best option that we could do within the pandemic restrictions. All right, next slide, Kohei. Another example of an augmentation of our service was our website. So previously, before 2016, I believe, when this website was made, people would reference kind of this mini pamphlet we had about all our clubs, about our bylaws, and really they had to get by on word of mouth, because people would just ask us, hey, what are the Executive Service Council bylaws? What are your policies? Where can I find forms and that kind of thing? So we decided, okay, let's put everything online so people can reference that, and we can reference people to this website. The URL is sassvc.com. And this was really an augmentation of our service, because here's like Kohei mentioned, a one-stop shop for logistics, which is the service portal. This is like a one-stop shop for marketing, for advertising, for any information you need about service at SAS. So really, if you want to learn more about service at SAS, just go on this website. A lot of information is on that. Next slide, though. Augmentation, though, can be simple too. I realize that a lot of you may not know how to code, and I don't know how to code. And so it's a very heady topic if you kind of want to code your own service portal or make your own website. But augmentation can be simple too. So in this example, my service club GK, Gawad Kalinga, I think GIS also has a club, has a GK club. We hold a charity run every year called the Zombie Run. And in the past, we've relied only on hard copy forms. And that's a lot of paper. It's like 4 sheets of paper per hard copy form. And we realized, first off, we switched to online forms primarily. But the second is, for the parents who still want hard copy forms, how can we cut down on the amount of paper? So we designed this form in the sense that we wanted to keep everything onto one sheet of paper. So you notice that this is a front and a back. And there's a line down the middle. And this is very simple tech, right? This line down the middle, the parents fill out the information on the top, they cut down the middle, and they keep that information pamphlet or the information like sheet. So everything they need to know about the Zombie Run is on that bottom half of the page. And everything we need as organizers of the event, such as t-shirt size, grade level, that goes back to us. And that's a very simple tech move you can make just by playing around on, this was made on the app Pages. Like it wasn't with Photoshop or Google Docs. It was just made with Pages. Like it's that simple. It's that easy. And that's just some tech you can play with. And that's augmenting your service because now, first off, less paper to go through, less resources wasted. I mean, it's overall a very good benefit. And so final slide for me at least. Accessibility and quality go hand in hand. The easier you make things for people, probably the better it is for them as well. And the better the quality is. Remember, oh, there's a typo here, but remember the less accessible things are, the less people will, for example, if you're doing a fundraiser, the less potential donors will want to help you. Just because if you're making it difficult for them to access your service, you're turning them away. So just keep that in mind. You want to make things for as easy for donors or supporters of your club and people you're serving as well. And that goes hand in hand with quality. Okay?
Yeah, for sure. So with that being said, now that we've gone through what we believe are sort of the 3 main ways in which technology can augment, automate, increase accessibility, I want to talk about the how, right? Very quickly, because we're running out of time. I want to talk about the how. How do we make that happen, right? And I saw a quick question in the Q&A that basically asked how we developed the service portal. And that was essentially just through JavaScript. It was basically just programming it from scratch. But nevertheless, that's really not right what the main point for today, right? The main takeaway for today, I don't want it to be go learn code, right? I want it instead to be how can I use whatever resources I have available in order to integrate technology into service, right? And so I want you to maybe think about an idea that you may have for a fundraiser, for an awareness event, or anything that you might want to organize for your service club, right? And perhaps what's hindering you from doing it, right? Is it because it'd be difficult to manage a bunch of guests? Or is it because it'd be difficult you don't know how to accept those donations? Or is it because you don't know how to make a website? There's a lots of different potential, like I said, junctions in the transmission of information that may sort of be hampering you, maybe sort of stopping you from making it happen, right? And here, an example of a few resources that you might want to use, that you might sort of consider using. And obviously, I can't give you a crash course of how to use every single resource, but these are just a few examples and a few things that you might want to get started with, right? I'll begin with Google Forms. Oh, it actually should be Google Sheets. Google Forms and Google Sheets, those usually go hand in hand. And, I'm sure most of you already use Google Sheets, right? But there's actually quite a few functions and quite a few things that, quite a few tools that are available on Google Sheets, right? That allows you to manage a bunch of rows, right? Or copy down one information from one spreadsheet to another, and things like that, that you can actually really quickly automate through simple functions, right? And these are things that you don't really need to know code to learn, right? And there are really easy tutorials online that really just allows you to sort of get these things automated really, really quickly. And so that's one way that I sort of like go about it, right? The sort of the rabbit hole inside Google Sheets goes pretty far, goes pretty deep. Another example that I think a lot of people are aware of is Squarespace, right? The SAS SVC website actually uses Squarespace to provide all of that. And that's pretty self-explanatory as well. One nifty tool that I know of is Zapier. And Zapier is just a service that basically allows you to automate and to connect different apps. So in Zapier, you actually have an option of a bunch of different apps, whether it be PayPal or Google Drive or Gmail or Dropbox, and you can basically link any of these two apps. For example, you can, through Zapier, you can configure your Gmail so that every single time you get a file in your Gmail, you can automatically save it to your Dropbox. Or every time you receive a payment in PayPal, you automatically record it on a Google Sheet. Right? And these are things that you can do by code, but these are things that you can very easily do or configure through an external service such as Zapier, right? And one thing that I would also say is that you can easily tap into student resources at school, right? For example, I'm currently responsible for the service portal, but I've been communicating with the Computer Science Honor Society at my school to see how I can basically augment the service portal, right? And how I can make it better, right? And if you want to make video, I'm sure there are, like thespian honor societies or those types of, video clubs or clubs that are catered towards videography or photography and various skills that you might not have, but you can usually sort of go to in order to enhance your service. Yeah, and so really the bottom line, once again, is not necessarily the technical knowledge aspect of things, right? But more about how you approach integrating technology into service, right? And I'm just going to refer back to that quote and say that technology at the end of the day should not be dictating everything you do within service, right? But rather it should be something that you can use to facilitate, to lubricate those different processes, and for you to make sure that your service is sort of closest to is done as easily and as smoothly as possible. Okay. All right. I'll take, let's do a few minutes. Can we do a few minutes for questions, Kyle?
Yeah. So the next thing that's happening in the service conference is the club discussions. That's at 3:30. So we can just, if you guys want to leave now and kind of get prepared for that already, you guys can go. But if you have any questions, just drop them in the Q&A box. We'll answer them, and we'll just keep going until as long as we need to if you guys have any questions. And so, yeah, if you check the chat, I've already linked some of the things we were referencing, like our website, our YouTube, the service assembly I mentioned earlier that I wasn't able to put on the slides, but just save those if you want to check them out later. So Rex, the club discussions are, let's say there's a club at GIS and a club at SAS that have similar missions, or they do similar work. We're trying to match those clubs up and have them just, we have some guided questions like, how has COVID impacted you? What kind of service do you guys do? How can we help? How can we learn from each other, making our service better? If you haven't signed up for that, just let us know and we'll sort you into a club, into a Zoom call for that. It's cool. I think you can stop screen share. Yeah. Just any questions we'll be answering.
I have one.
Yeah, go on.
How are you, with your fantastic knowledge and skill base, passing it on to the younger kids?
Well, primarily I'm a filmmaker, so that's kind of my tech kind of thing that I do. Kohei is, like, obviously in this sense, a coder. For me, at least, filmmaking, well, I'm a bit more thankful because filmmaking is a skill that's a little less like, you don't need to know like the Java or Python or whatever languages you guys do. So it's a bit, filmmaking is a bit more abstract in the sense you just have to kind of tell them. Like for example, I'm passing my knowledge on to the 3 people who will be here next year, Renee, Ashley, and Mingyu in the SEAS Council. But I think they can pass off. I mean, they've been on film shoots, like they were there when we filmed the Surf Assembly, so they kind of know how things go. The technical knowledge of knowing how to use a camera isn't really needed anymore because like iPhones are good enough at this point in time. So that's not as much of a need. Oh no, Kohei, what about you?
Yeah, I think like coding and programming in general is big enough of a thing so that I don't have to sort of like, take somebody by the hand and teach them everything. For example, the service portal was originally not developed by me. It was developed by a graduate an alum who graduated last year. And I basically sort of like took it on. But, because I already sort of had a bit of prior knowledge, it was basically the handoff process from him to myself was pretty smooth. And like I said, right, I'm currently communicating with the Computer Science Honor Society to make sure that it's even better, and that even after I leave, and even after the people who are currently working on it leave, it can continue to stay as it is and be even better, right?
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there aren't any questions, oh, hold on. I think, Rex, the point of a website wouldn't necessarily be for the officers, but more for potential donors, people outside the club, like even people outside your school. So GK has a website, but it's not for the members. It's for people who sign up for the Zombie Run, the charity thing I mentioned earlier. It's for it's for like faculty, it's for parents. So that's more of a, so I know, Rex, that you're in a club caring for Cambodia. That would be more like, what does CFC do? What have you done in the past? What do you hope to do? And it's kind of things that, it's public knowledge. But I would recommend that, you do keep any important info and docs that are private to the club with the club.
Yeah. And just to add on, I think, for example, say you hold, I don't know, like a fundraiser within the school, right? And that's an opportunity for people to hear about, your club, right? Caring for Cambodia, whatever club you're in, right? Mm-hmm. And after that, sometimes there would be people who'd want to know more about your club, right? Like they see, Caring for Cambodia fundraiser. They see that and they go, what is Caring for Cambodia, right? I want to know more about it beyond just with whatever fundraiser you're doing now, right? And then it's up to you to sort of make sure that if that person has interest in Caring for Cambodia, you're not letting that person go out without getting the information that they need, right? And a major the way that you can do that is obviously through websites, right? That's an easy way to do things.
And also consider audience. If it's primarily students, then make an Instagram that has all your information that you need, right? The website's a bit more professional because it's also accessible by adults. So that applies to if adults are within your primary audience.